everyone. Welcome back to the MHP Show podcast. I'm your host, Derek Vickers. Everyone knows here on the MHP Show, we talk about all the crazy stuff that happens with mobile home parks or trailer parks or manufactured housing communities, if we really want to be professional about it. And today I have another guest with us today. I have Mr. Dave Foster. Now, I'm really excited about this guest I have here today because we've never had a guest on that's been able to discuss this in depth. So I'll tell you that Dave is the founder and CEO of the 1031 Investor. He has 20 plus years experience investing in real estate, various asset classes. He's actually the author of the Amazon best-selling book, Lifetime Tax-Free Wealth. I love that. The Real Estate Investor's Guide to the 1031 Exchange. Welcome to the MHP Show, Dave.
You know, you are very kind, Derek, when you talk about just someone not being able to go that far in depth. What you really mean is that I'm a nerd who, as one mentor once described, I'm willing to go 2 miles deep in a 2-foot wide creek. And that's where I live.
Hey, well, look, I'm telling you, like, I love that. I love that because if you become like a super expert in one thing, you become the expert of that thing instead of being, you know, a jack of all trades, right? What is a jack of all trades and a master of none? You don't want to be that. But I love the title to your book, Lifetime Tax-Free Wealth. That just rings to, you know, what real estate investor doesn't, you know, want tax-free wealth? So I'd love to get into it here because I've got some members of our Facebook group, and I'll just throw a little plug in for that really quick. If you haven't joined our Facebook group, it's called Park Investing Pros or Mobile Home Park Investing Pros on Facebook. We share lots of valuable content on there. So we have some questions from people in the group that we'll eventually get to. But I guess first and foremost, Dave, as we get into, before we get into the 1031, just talk a little bit about, you know, kind of what you currently do now.
Right. So this has all been like you said, a 20 to 30 year outgrowth of my journey as a real estate investor. 30 years ago, I made one, it's not a fatal mistake, but it was a bad mistake that haunts me to this day. Mm-hmm. I bought my first piece of property. I fixed it up. I made a truckload of money. And that didn't know about 1031 exchanges. And so I ended up paying a $30,000 tax bill. To this day, it still keeps me up at night once in a while thinking about what if I had been able to keep that $30,000 and invest it for myself, compounding over 30 years. That's a bunch of money.
For sure.
That was left on the table. And that's what led me on the search for the 1031 exchange. And when I discovered it, it was a game changer for us. Because from that day forward, what the 1031 exchange allows you to do is to sell investment real estate and replace that with new investment real estate and not having to pay tax in the middle. So the beautiful thing is it captures what I call the second half strategy of real estate investing. Everybody all knows the proverb, right? You make money in real estate when you buy it. And yeah, I agree. Finding the good bargains and ferreting them out, and doing all the due diligence and underwriting, it's awesome stuff. And you do. But the other half of that statement is that the way you sell it determines what you keep. Doesn't matter if you make all the money in the world if you don't keep it on the backside. And that's what the 1031 allows you to do. So, yeah, lifetime tax-free wealth, because you're going to be able to take all of that deferred tax for all your life and invest it for your benefit, making the return for yourself. And you know what the best thing of all is, Derek? It's not something I like to think about, but you and I are both heading there. There is a final D that is not defer, and that is die. But the best thing you can do is die owning your real estate, because then the tax goes away and your heirs get the properties tax-free. So as I call it, it's the 4 Ds: defer, 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 and then die. And that's lifetime tax-free wealth plus a legacy for your heirs.
I love that. And how is that? So how does that work if, you die and the property is still in your name and that just automatically goes to your heirs and it just keeps going as it would go?
When you die, it goes into your estate and it is revalued as if your heirs paid market value for it on the day you died. So all of that deferred tax over the years disappears at that moment. So you don't pay it. Your estate doesn't pay it. Your heirs don't pay it. I have a family that we just started a few years ago on their third generation. We started doing 1031 exchanges for granddad. And when he died, his son inherited everything. Now, we didn't see him for a few years because why? 1031 exchanges exist to defer tax on gain. And he inherited them tax-free. But a few years later, once the profits again started to kick in, he started doing his own exchanges with us. And then he passed away a few years ago. His children got his portfolio, and now they are doing their own 1031 exchanges. That's 3 generations, 0 tax.
Oh, wow. Wow. I mean, you got to love that. You got to love that. What are some Dave, what are some common misconceptions or things that people misunderstand about 1031s? Because I'm not an expert at them. And so I'm curious at things that people miss.
Anyway, let's put this question. That's a great question, by the way. And there's a whole bunch of different levels to that. Let's take that in the context of the 4 Ds of 1031 investing. Mm-hmm. So the first one is, one very common misconception is, I got to pay the tax anyways, so why not pay it now? I hear that all the time. And my response always is my first question back is, do you have a retirement account? If they do, game over. Why are you asking me about the power of deferred tax when that's exactly what a 401k and an IRA is and a Roth? It's allowing your money to compound, tax deferred or tax free. But even more than that, with the 1031 exchange, because you are indefinitely deferring the tax, you're able to harness the compounding effect. So whether it's 2 years or whether it's 40 years, as long as that tax stays deferred, you get the benefit of the deferment. So on my $30,000, if I would have 1031'd it and made 10%, but only kept it for 7 years, 7.2 years, I would have made another $30,000. If I would have kept it for 14.4 years, I would have made another $60,000. At 10%, it doubles every 7.2 years. So that's a very common misconception, though. They don't think about the compounding effect of that, whether it's a shorter or long term. So the second most common misconception is on what you can do with a 1031 exchange. And so many people think, if I'm selling a single family home, I've got to buy a single family home. Like kind is kind of the phrase that's used. Well, like kind really just means any type of investment real estate. And so the second D is also defer, because the 1031 exchange, though, will allow you to harness whatever part of the real estate cycle you're on. If you started investing in single family homes and the market is telling you that plays like mobile home parks are now the thing, or self-storage or commercial or whatever, the 1031 exchange will allow you to change sectors of real estate as long as it's used for investment. So with the 1031, you can go anywhere in the country to any type of real estate. Cash flow, appreciation, doesn't matter. It'll accommodate wherever you're at. And then, of course, the last thing, the common misconception is, again, the end game, which we already talked about, which again, I'm going to have to pay it anyways. So why not pay it now? Well, the answer is because you don't. You can defer it. And as long as you defer it, you get the benefit from it. You can defer it to accommodate wherever the real estate cycle is. You can defer it to accommodate wherever you're at. to move from active to passive, from passive to multiple properties, from multiple properties to a single property, doesn't matter. And then finally, you can die and your heirs get it. So people just don't look beyond the initial. I'm going to sell this property to defer tax. What does that do for me? And instead, if you look at the long game, you'll see a huge bunch of benefit.
Yeah, for sure. And that's fascinating to me. And like, you mentioned like you defer to your heirs. And then you mentioned something that it got revalued when it's in your trust. So that revalue, is that then if your heirs try to sell it, like what is their basis on the property then? Is it your basis or is it, you get what I'm asking?
It's a brand new basis. So, looking at the two of us, I've got more gray hair. So I'm probably going to die first.
Well, my hair's short right now. I just got it cut and mine pops out here on the sides.
That's looking stylish. So, but let's say that I want to give my property to you. And I've got a mobile home park that I have depreciated out so that its basis is maybe $200,000.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a $2 million mobile home park. Now, if I were to sell that, I'd be paying tax on what? 1.8 million. Well, that's a bunch of tax. But if I hang long enough, and if you pull the plug on me when it's that time, you're going to inherit that property. You get the property as if you paid $2 million for it.
Wow.
My basis is what's called stepped up for you so that you get it at market value. So if you turned around and sold it the next day, you would pay zero tax.
Wow.
That's how powerful that is.
Wow. I did not know that.
Don't tell your kids if you got kids.
I'm not, because then
they'll
they're going to be like, dude,
going into med school just so they can learn when to pull the plug.
Yeah. I'm definitely not going to let them know that. So I guess, what would be I got a bunch of questions here and I'm trying not to jump around. So like if someone, let's say, so for example, we were looking at potentially selling a couple of assets last year and the gain. So nobody realizes, and I will say this, the people who fight against, we should get rid of the 1031 exchange and capital gains taxes should be higher. Until you put yourself in the position where you have to confront a $750,000 or $1 million tax bill to the IRS, then you'll be like, all right, dude, I just put a bunch of freaking work into this property. I did all the work. I did all the value add. Why in the hell do I need to write a check for $1 million? And so when I had to look, I was never like someone that needs to take that away. Don't get me wrong. But when I actually had to confront it myself was when I was like, oh shit, like this sucks. Right. So what is the process if someone wants to do that? Like if they say, hey, all right, we're going to sell these properties. I'm going to 1031 it. Like, what is the process?
Right. So it's actually a very transparent process that starts with the requirement that you use the services of a qualified intermediary.
Mm-hmm.
That's an unrelated third party, someone like us. All we can do is to process your 1031 exchanges. I'm an accountant. I can't do your taxes. My partners are attorneys. They're not going to do your trusts. We can only function to document the 1031 exchange as the sale, and then we have to hold the proceeds. The IRS does not let you touch the money while it's in between the sale and purchase. And then there's further documentation on the purchase side. And as long as you do it the right way, and there's a couple things that are really critical. The first one is that the timelines are constrained. So from the day you close your sale, you have 45 days to identify your potential replacements and 180 total days to close on them. You have to take title to the new property or have it be the same taxpayer for the old property as the new property. And if you want to defer all tax, you have to purchase at least as much as you sell and use all the proceeds to do it. So it's got to be real estate. You got to use a QI. You got the timing constraints. You have to keep title the same. And you have to purchase at least as much as you sell if you want to defer all tax. That is the 30-second version from a 2-sentence statute that has created over 10,000 pages of case law. So is that 30,000 feet or 50,000 feet? I don't know. But yeah, but for you, it's really as simple as you're going to sell property, you're going to buy property, and you do it all the normal way. And at the end of the day, if you do it the right way, then the IRS rewards you with indefinitely deferring the tax. Now, I love when you were asking the question and you were talking about the why, how angry you get, and why are these people talking about getting away from the 1031 when you're working hard to get it? Well, a mentor of mine once challenged me to stop thinking of the tax code as a way that the government uses to get your money. He said, there is an element to that, yeah, because we need hospitals and roads and all that. He said, but more importantly, the government is using the tax code as a behavior incentivizer. Mm. And if you perform the behaviors they want, you will be rewarded in the tax code in those provisions. Now, that just that blew my whole mind because, yeah, the current administration has tried to get rid of 1031 several times. Every administration I've ever been under has talked about it. Why don't they ever do it? Because it's one of the best things for our economy that could ever happen. It started in 1920 for farmers who, if they sold their farms, by the time they paid the tax, they would not have enough money left to go buy a bigger farm. And our country desperately needed agribusiness. So 1031 was put into place. So now, but also not only could they buy new farms, what about the new guys who wanted to go into farming? There was nothing to buy because the market was stagnant. Now let's put that into perspective today of 1031 exchanges. Yes, if you do it right, you're rewarded by not paying tax, but it's capital gains tax. Whereas what happens in every transaction? There's 2 realtors generating fees. There's 2 title companies. There's 2 appraisers, 2 inspectors. There's 2 title insurance companies. There's all these things. And all of those people are making a living, good for the economy. And they're also paying ordinary income tax, which is higher. So in exchange for giving up a relatively modest amount of capital gains tax on real estate, they're encouraging a robust economy that's employing a lot of people, and the government's generating a truckload more taxes. Never thought about that, did you?
I did not. It's interesting.
And yet it makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
It does.
And guess what? Today, I know you get the calls and emails every day from people who are wanting to get into the business. The only way most of these people can get into the business is if people who are one step ahead of them can sell their properties to buy bigger because they can only afford to buy entry-level stuff.
Right.
So we're just keeping the velocity of the real estate market, and the government does love that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I definitely never thought of that because, when you confront a big tax bill, it's all like, like this sucks, right? But I never thought of it in that perspective. And it definitely, it makes a lot of sense what you just said. You did say one thing. And so on the 45-day identification, so if you can what's the definition of identified? Do you have to have something under contract? Do you have to have something under LOI? Do you have to have something to prove that it's what does that mean?
Welcome to the IRS world again. It simply has to be in writing. So it's a written document, and it has to be a specific identification. So it couldn't be, I'm going to buy a unit in Clearwater. It would have to be, I'm going to buy a unit at 765 Clear Street in Clearwater. So you got to be able to go up and ring the doorbell because it's got to be specific. You don't have to have it under contract. It literally just has to be in writing. It has to be a specific address, and it has to be in place prior to midnight on day 45. Because after day 45, that list becomes set in stone. It cannot be changed. So if you simply put a property on your list, write it down, that's okay. You can do that. But day 60 rolls around and you lose out on that property. You can only choose from properties on that list. So you're basically stuck.
So you can
You can only buy that property.
You can add multiple properties to the list?
You can. But again, welcome to IRS world, who started this whole thing because they lost a court case. So just imagine a ticked off IRS who has to let us do this, but they don't have to make it easy. If you name 3 or fewer properties on your list, it doesn't matter what they're worth. So sell a property for $1,000, $100,000, name 3 $5 million properties, no problem. If you want to name more than 3 properties, then either the total value of that list cannot exceed 200% of what you sold, or you have to purchase every property on the list. I know, right? Where's the logic? So if you are, as a general rule of thumb, if you're selling an asset and you're wanting to buy bigger, keep your list of 3 or fewer.
Got it.
If you're selling an asset and you're wanting to buy several smaller properties, then you might be able to name more than 3 and still make that list work.
Yeah.
But the key is they've got to be on your 45-day list, because those are the only ones you can close on. And after day 45, you can't change the list.
Yeah. Yeah. And if you're over 3, you have to buy them all?
Unless the total value is less than 200%. So you could sell a $2 million asset and you could name 20 properties on it. And as long as their value was no greater than $4 million, you could do that.
Interesting. Yeah, I never knew that. And I always was curious about the 45 days to identify, because I've heard people that have had problems with that. And I could understand in last year's, market, there just wasn't that much to buy that was penciling. But they probably start too late and procrastinate. So that's probably the issue too.
That's a lot of it. Sure can, because that's one key hack for everybody out there that's kind of considering doing something like this, is that you can be under contract for your new property anytime you want, including before your old property closes. So we will have a lot of people, gosh, back like 4 or 5 years ago, remember what was happening in California? People were getting 50 offers above ask on day 1, that kind of stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So my advice to clients who were saying, I'll never be able to buy something, was take care of the hardest thing first. And if the hardest thing is finding your new property, go out and get it under contract. Then list your property, accept one of the offers on day 1. And as long as you close the sale before you close the purchase, you're good to go. So take care of what the market is telling you. The hard job is first. I had a poor guy just this year who he was buying a bunch of smaller lots, and he was going to build basically his own rental community. And the problem was he didn't heed my advice to get them under contract. So day 45 passes, all he's got are these lots, and he got outbid for almost all of them. I said, dude, you can only buy these properties now because you're past day 45. So you know what he had to do, Derek? God, he had to go to every buyer who had outbid him and offer them $5,000 or $10,000 more.
Oh, wow.
For their lot.
Wow.
So that he could salvage his 1031. Now, it ended up being worth it. He still saved money overall, but think of how much more he would have saved.
Yeah.
If he just would have got him under contract. It was a dark, dark day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And in that case, if the person he went to was like, screw you, dude, I want these lots, I'm keeping them, then he's going to just have to pay, 23.8% tax or whatever it was.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. Interesting. Question on, another, tax deferring strategy, so to speak, cost segregation studies and accelerating the depreciation. We know we're down to 60% this year, I believe. And
Hopefully that's going to change though, right?
oh gosh, I hope so. I hope so. That's fingers crossed. Now, what would be the I guess there is a difference, but like when I was in this situation, we ended up not selling these properties, but I'm freaking out, like looking for, like, I'm literally freaking out with my accountant. And the funny thing, he's like, dude, Derek, like, chill. I remember when you were in the insurance business making $30,000 a year. Like, this is a good problem, dude. Like, chill out. Right. But like, I was looking at a cost segregation study, like just buying more properties that year, cost segging them and offsetting the taxes that way. Like, would you say a 1031 is better than doing that, or is it just a different strategy?
What I would say is that the best strategy is to do them both.
Mm.
Certainly, and there are a lot of people, they coin it what the lazy man's 1031, and particularly syndicators who are putting together projects where you're buying into the syndication, because a membership interest in a syndication generally does not qualify for 1031 treatment. So someone who's selling a piece of real estate and would like to go into syndication has a choice, generally, where they can either buy real estate or they can go into the syndication. But because the syndication is buying a membership interest in the entity, it's not considered real estate, so you can't do it. So they're kind of faced with that choice. And what folks have always said was, well, you could turn this into a lazy man's 1031. So you're going to pay the tax, but in that same year, you're going to go into the syndication and get your bonus depreciation, and that'll offset that tax. And then when you sell it later, instead of having to recapture the tax, you're just going to do it again.
Yeah.
So basically, you keep hoping you're going to buy new depreciation. Just this last spring, though, the IRS came out with some final rulings that said that you can defer any type of depreciation as long as the property you're purchasing is substantially the same components. So going from like a house to a house, there's all the same kinds of components, the HVAC, the roof, the wiring, and all of that. Those are the kinds of things that you cost seg out.
Mm-hmm.
So the IRS has said you can now 1031 exchange and defer that forward as well. So for you, Derek, let's put it in mobile home park terms. Let's say you're selling an asset for $1 million and you cost segged and bonus depreciated out and got rid of everything, just for ease of simplicity. So your basis is zero. You sell the property, you got taxed on $1 million. Okay, that ain't cool. Now you could go buy another property and then cost seg it, but are you going to be able to get as much? Probably not now. And you're still going to be facing the prospect of just kicking that down the road and always having to find a new prospect. But what if instead you did a 1031 exchange into another mobile home park? Let's say you 1031 exchanged into a $2 million mobile home park. What you just did was you deferred all of that $1 million in gain forward and the depreciation recapture. And because you bought more than you sold, you just bought another $1 million of depreciable basis.
Mm.
So you can start depreciating that.
Mm.
So you get the benefit of indefinitely deferred tax, and you still get depreciation, and you can buy more depreciation if you want.
Mm. Mm. I see. And so you mentioned something about syndications. And so if we've got a guy who's got $1 million in a syndication, we sell the property and he gets his $1 million gain, that he can't, let's say I have 10 investors in this deal, he can't then 1031 his portion into another property if he wants to go buy himself, or 1031 into another syndication or fund.
Right. Because why? What does he own? He owns a membership interest in a limited partnership.
Right.
And that's not real estate.
Right.
Now, the way that some syndications are able to work around this is that they will accept 1031 investors by selling to them a in common interest in the real estate itself. So that the limited partnership becomes a tenant in common, a partner with the investor. And you just have to have your ducks in a row for how the property is going to be managed and what happens when it's sold and their liability for the loan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But that's generally how syndicators are able to do that. Or let me give you another life hack that's just awesome with this, because I see 1031 investors wanting to move into more passive investments. Syndications are perfect for that, but they've got all these underlying issues, right? Because they're really like two different asset classes. So what I will counsel people is, instead of just dumping the 1031, losing the compounding effect, and then starting a new life with syndications, why don't you sell the property if you want, do a 1031 exchange, buy 2 replacement properties. So let's use an example of, I'm going to sell a property for $500,000. It's got it's got $200,000 in debt. Okay, so I walk away with $300,000. I'm going to take $250,000 of that in my 1031 exchange. I'm going to buy a property for $250,000, free and clear. It's cash. I don't owe anything on it. I'm going to take the other $50,000 and I'm going to buy a property with leverage for $250,000. That's a 20% down payment. So at the end of the day, did I buy for as much as I sold? Yeah, I sold for 5, bought for 5. Did I use all my proceeds to do it? Yep, I used $250,000 on one, $50,000 on the other. But what do I have now? A free and clear property. First of all, it's out of risk. All I got to do is keep the lights on.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have to worry about losing it. But secondly, and more importantly, if I find the right syndication that I want to move into, I simply do a cash out refinance of that property and use that money, which is tax-free anyways, to go invest in my syndication.
Yeah.
So in one fell swoop, I keep my compounding of the 1031. I'm increasing my 1031 portfolio, and I'm using tax-free dollars to then invest in syndications. That's a lot of good expansion.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny you say that, because I was going to ask you that question, because when we were looking at this, that's one of the things I was thinking about doing. I'm like, okay, well, if this gain just buys this property cash, then I can 1031 into the property. And then a couple months later, once another deal is identified, I can, refi the thing and get most of my cash back out and then go invest. Like, I was like intense into this, thinking of ideas, and that's freaking awesome, dude. That's like that's good, man. And I don't think I'm sure some people do think about that, but that's a great tip and strategy there, Dave. So I want to get into some questions that we had come through on our Facebook group, and I think we actually hit some of these. So actually, I did have one more question about the tenant in common thing, because we run into this when we're dealing with mom and pop sellers. They've got very low basis on their properties, and they're going to pay a relatively large amount in taxes once they sell these deals. And we've offered them the opportunity to potentially come and invest with us. And that's where that tenant in common thing would come into play. So it's doable. It just, there's a little bit more back end work and paperwork, and it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. So generally what we'll see is that the syndications that are able to do it will generally have a little higher minimum, because it's got to be worth their while.
Yeah. Right.
Just to figure out how to make the two tenants work together. But it is doable.
Yeah. Got it. All right. So someone was asking about a reverse 1031 and the process of that. I don't even think I really know what that is. So can you explain what that is? And
it doesn't reverse the statutory order, although that kind of is what it says it does.
Yeah.
Again, welcome to IRS world. The statutory order of a 1031 exchange is that you cannot take title to your new property until after your old property has sold. But what are you going to do if you find the perfect new property, but your old one hasn't closed yet? This is what the reverse exchange allows you to do. We, as the qualifying intermediary, are allowed to form a holding entity, an LLC, that you're not a member of. And that entity is going to take title to the new property. And then we can hold it for up to 180 days while you finish selling your old property.
Got it.
Then you sell your old property and you purchase this property we've been holding for you.
Got it. And so, Dave Foster LLC, whatever it is, purchases XYZ mobile home park, essentially. But your fund, you close it with your funds, right?
Well, we don't have any money. We're poor. So you have to provide the money.
Well, our funds.
Bugaboo.
I mean, my funds. Yeah, my funds.
Exactly. From wherever. It could be a portfolio lender, private lender, cash on hand. Anything but a normal mortgage product is going to work.
Yeah. Okay. And then if you have, this isn't registering in my head yet correctly. So that's what
what's going to happen is you're going to lend money to us and we're going to buy the new property.
Yeah.
We're going to hold it. So let's say it's $1 million. Then you're going to, while we're holding it, it's under your control. So you're actually running it, generating the money, fixing it up, doing whatever you want. It's yours in every way but title. You sell your old property for $1 million. And then you're going to purchase in your 1031 exchange the property that we're holding. And it's going to be, you sold for $1 million and now you're buying for $1 million. So that $1 million from your 1031 exchange goes into the purchase. Part of that purchase, though, is that we borrowed money from you, right? So that the $1,000 is repaid to you and only the 1031 exchange is going forward.
Got it. So like we have a property under contract right now. So let's say we're buying this and I know I've got one that I'm selling that I basically want to do this with. And so basically with you have the entity which buys it and holds title to it. But I would loan money to the entity, right? And then I sell the other one. It goes into the 1031, right?
Yes.
And then that your entity just reimburses me.
Exactly.
And then the 1030, I got it.
Exactly. Now, let's say, because I know this happens a lot, let's say it's a mobile home park that needs some improvements. And you're going to sell your old property for $1 million. How much do you have to buy? You have to buy $1 million in real estate. But what if you find a mobile home park that you can buy for $600,000 that needs $400,000 in improvement? We do a reverse improvement exchange. So you lend us $600,000 and we buy the property. And then you lend us $400,000 and we improve the property. But who's improving it? You are. We're not having anything to do with it. We're just that conduit. Then once that property has been improved, what's it worth? The acquisition cost was $600,000.
Yeah.
And there were $400,000 of improvements put on it. So you sell your old property for $1 million and you buy that new property for $1 million and you just bought yourself a renovated, up and running, going concern park.
A mobile home park that needs, renovation and stuff? Really?
Surely not.
Okay, good. So that was one question. So this one, I'm not sure I understand this question, but it says, any potential options for 1031 when seller financing? Does the seller have to put all proceeds into an intermediary?
Yeah, I think what they're talking about is so many times with larger assets or quirky sectors like mobile home parks, you'll get people who either have lots of cash and bad credit, or they'll have great credit, but not a lot of cash. So traditional lending for them is going to be tough.
Mm-hmm.
But what you could do is you could sell the property to them and you carry the note. So you're acting as the bank.
Yeah.
Now, the rules of the 1031 say that you've got to purchase at least as much as you sell, and you have to use all the proceeds to do that. So if you sell a property for $1 million and there was no debt on it, but you took $200,000 down and carried a note for $800,000,
Mm-hmm.
both the note and the cash would be considered proceeds of the sale because they both have value. So you have to use both the note and the pros and the cash in your next purchase. Well, it's hard to do that, right? Because you're going to go to the seller of the next park and say, would you take this on a carry note? They're going to say no. So what you could do is before you have to purchase the new property, you simply swap out the note for cash so that now your exchange account has the full amount of cash that's needed. And outside the exchange account, you own the note. And that note, by the way, is tax-free,
Mm-hmm.
except for the interest that comes in, because you, in essence, bought it for par value.
Right. Right.
So that's how you can do 1031s. That's kind of the deep end of the pool. We actually have a video on that on our YouTube channel.
Yeah.
And I discuss it at length in our book as well. So, but that is the deep end of the pool. But it is possible to use seller finance with a 1031.
Okay. Cool. And I think we may have already touched on this one. If multiple partners involved with the sale, are there any workarounds so one of the partners can 1031 his portion? From my understanding, all proceeds can't be touched. Curious if any creative workarounds.
Well, let's talk about what they mean by partner. So if they simply mean me, you, and two other people got together and bought a piece of property as tenants in common, we actually own our own piece of real estate. It just happens to be 25% of the larger piece. So when that is sold, all four partners can go separate ways. And one could do a 1031, one could not, however they want to do it. Where it becomes complicated is what if that partnership is truly a partnership or a limited liability company with four members? When that happens, that multi-member LLC is filing its own tax return.
Mm-hmm.
So it's actually the owner of the real estate,
Right.
not the members. The members own the LLC owns the real estate. So when it's sold, the LLC could do a 1031 exchange. Now, if everybody wanted to buy their own piece of property and do a 1031, that's relatively simple. The LLC sells it, does a 1031, buys four properties. And then once that's done, it dissolves and gives the properties to each one of the four members. That's called a swap and drop. Swap being the 1031 process, and then drop being the eliminate the LLC process. There is a growing body of private letter rulings and case law that says that you can actually do the opposite as well, which would be a drop and swap right before the closing of the sale.
Mm-hmm.
The LLC is dissolved and the property is quitclaimed into the partners' names. So what just happened? Now we've got four people that are tenants in common that each own their own real estate.
Right.
So again, the property sold and they can each go their own way.
Got it. And so on that drop and swap example there, you drop the LLC, then the LLC wouldn't have to have a 1031. You know, Dave could have one, Derek could have one, Joe could have one, and Steve could have one if we all four own the property.
That's exactly right.
Interesting. You know, it always amazes me. And I got a couple more questions if you're okay with that. I know we're getting on time here. You know, it's so interesting that I talk to other entrepreneurs and people, and it's like, you know, whatever kind of tax law that's thrown in, we always find some workaround on something. We always find a workaround.
It's so true. You know, I don't know who to give credit to this for, but there was an old proverb that said that If you took 7 monkeys and put them in a room with typewriters, that sooner or later, at some point in time, they would end up typing Shakespeare.
Mm.
That's the probability. So I kind of adapted that, saying if you put 7 attorneys in a room, all with their own brief memorandums, sooner or later they're going to find a way to beat the tax code.
Yes, for sure.
Just takes time.
Definitely. And so sometimes I'm like, okay, well, if they put some stupid tax law in, like, there's going to be some dude in a situation that has a lot of money that's going to figure it out. Then it's going to become case law, and it's like, oh, okay, we can do this now, or something to that effect.
And then you and I get to ride on the shoulders of those who paid big bucks.
That's
I
right.
like being in that position. Absolutely.
100%. So Vincent said, what's the minimum amount to make it worth it for a 1031? I mean, it sounds like from what we talked about that wouldn't matter.
My favorite client of all time, I love telling her story. This was like 2003. She sold a lot for like $11,000. And by the time all was said and done, she was going to end up, by paying the 1031 fee, she was going to end up sheltering like $500. And I said, are you sure you want to do this? And her answer was, hey, that's my $500. Yes.
Mm.
So there's a philosophy.
Yeah.
I've seen other people who say, nah, it's not worth it. I'm just not going to do it.
Yeah.
I guess it all depends on how dear those dollars are to you.
Right. Another question here. We may have already. I think we may have sort of answered this, but Garrett was asking, can you 1031 your equity into a deal you already own, or does it have to be a new purchase? And second part of that, and can you 1031 into a deal that you are syndicating or raising capital for?
Was that Eric that did that?
What's that?
Who asked that question?
That was Garrett.
Garrett asked that question. Remind me not to take his phone call. He's at the deep end of the pool right there. Yeah, for Garrett. The answer to every one of those is kind of, it depends.
Yeah.
So you're selling a piece of property that's in your name, and you want to buy part of a property from a group that you're already a member of. If that's an LLC and you're not more than 50% member of that LLC, you could probably do that.
Mm.
You would buy 50% of the property from the LLC. Now, you couldn't buy 50% of the LLC. You'd have to buy 50% of the asset. And so what ended up happening is your LLC would own a certain amount of property, and you own a certain amount of that same property. Could get messy, but could work. If everybody were tenants in common, you could buy your partner's interests out. Absolutely. Again, as long as you're not more than a 50% owner, you're not a related party. So yeah, there's some ways to do it, Garrett. Syndications that you are putting together, probably not. Now, you could use it to buy a piece of property that you then later contribute into a syndication. So you 1031 from one park to another park. You know the park, what do you want to do? You say, I got $1 million I got to put into this thing, so I'm going to syndicate it. Well, you would then simply take that property that was the product of the 1031 exchange, and you would create the structure for the syndication, contribute the property into it. But once it's already in the syndication and you've got things started, there's really no way to do it at that point.
Got it. I love that. He's jumping in the deep end of the pool there. I guess that's the gray area when you get into that. There's a lot of gray when it comes to this stuff. It sounds like, to a degree.
You think about how many different variations of scenarios there could be in anything. There's no way that they could have all been covered in the statutory case law. So you kind of left using your best judgment, and then a whole lot of people end up having to make a decision between would they rather ask forgiveness or would they rather ask permission?
Mm.
And most folks, usually with the IRS, end up saying, I'll ask forgiveness because I can't even talk to them on the phone. So how am I ever going to get permission?
Yeah. Yeah. Cause good luck talking to anybody on the phone there. It's crazy. Won't get into that here. But Dave, man, you have provided a ton of value. My knowledge has gone up on this just from chatting with you on here. So if people want to learn more about what you do, where can they find you and what kind of services do you provide? Tell us about the book or whatever you want to talk about.
Yeah. So we realized early on, years and years ago, that the best way to create clients for 1031 exchanges is to educate them because nobody knows about them.
Yep.
So the 1031investor.com is our home website, and it's got calculators, it's got articles, it's got links to our YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/the 1031investor, where we've got over 50 videos on every one of these little individual topics that we were talking about. So plenty of ways to do that. And then, of course, same thing, just wanting to kind of close the circle on providing education resources. I wrote the book, Lifetime Tax-Free Wealth, A Real Estate Investor's Guide to the 1031 Exchange. And, honestly, Derek, I kind of thought when I started to write it that it was going to be this cute little how-to manual, 1031 exchanges for dummies or something like that. But what it ended up morphing into, because of all the unique scenarios we've encountered, is it became more a strategic roadmap for how to plot a course using 1031 exchanges. The part of the book I'm most happy with is when we took several case studies of actual people and tracked them through their real estate investing careers using 1031 exchanges. Military people that wanted to become big in multifamily, people who were accidental investors, people who changed courses and classes, and people like us who use the 1031 exchange to end up buying a sailboat tax-free and raising our children on it for 10 years.
Mm. Mm.
Those case studies will give you a lot of fodder to say, well, wait a minute. If that person could do that, can I do this? And that's what I wanted it to happen.
That's great. That's great. Well, awesome. And so I think we'll throw your links and stuff and anything in the show notes. And so Dave, look, I really appreciate you coming on to the show. You provided a ton of value today. And everyone, thank you for watching the MHP Show. And we will see you all next week. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, Spotify. Where else are we? iTunes. And leave a good comment, please. You can leave a bad one too if you want. Like, if you don't like it, whatever. And we will see you all next week. Did you want to say something, Dave?
Well, I was going to say, if you're going to say something bad, say it about Derek, not me.
There you go. We'll do that. People do say bad stuff, but it's okay.
It's okay.
It's okay. All right. We'll see you guys next week. Peace.